So we know all the components that are in the batch.
Right.
And we know the on-hand inventories. Do you think is it habit or get to the point where you could click on it and be able, based upon inventories on hand and what your requirements are, to be able to say, yes, I am capable of making this batch?
It's a great question. So I'm reluctant to do that, and let me share with you why. First off, MRP already today reports where you're going to be short of inventory. Okay. As a general rule for MRP, what you want to do is say, this is my schedule, and then let procurement decide whether they can get it to you in time. There are some asterisks to that, and there are some exceptions to that, especially inside a certain planning horizon. I completely get that I am bound by raw material availability that I've got to work with. I completely get that. But outside a certain planning horizon, I shouldn't have to be worried about the raw materials.
Yeah, I get you there.
And so from an MRP regen, I'm really thinking in terms of from that boundary outward, I shouldn't have to have that conversation, whether I can. However, that really does exist, that the best customer in the world calls up, I need this product, I got to get this batch in, how can I do that? So I completely get that.
Yeah, because then you got to go through every single item,
right?
And vet each item out.
Yeah, and I'm not going to belabor the point here, but I do get the point that if I put a batch ticket on hand, I say I want to make a batch ticket, tell me when I'm going to be short of inventory for this batch. That is a very rational, reasonable question to ask the system, and we can do that via a report. We can do that today. So if you create the batch ticket, not in this screen, but on the batch entry screen, if you create the batch ticket, you can run a report, an exception report that says you'd be short of these inventory items.
Oh, is that like
That
already in Vicinity?
That we can do today. There's a report that we just need to load up on your thing called the exception report, raw material exception report. For that scenario, I can get on board with that, because that really does exist. The caveat or the challenge to what you just did is you potentially just screwed up the next batch.
Yeah.
Because you're now committing raw material that you were expecting was going to be available off of the last MRP run. So I can truly get on board if it's truly an exception. And it's just going to happen, and then yes, you're going to be taking a look at real quick, did I just mess up tomorrow's production? Like Robbie from Pete over to pay Paul. Yes.
Is there any reason when you install Vicinity that you can't continue to use functionality in GP like PO Generator?
I don't know the reason why it would be a problem.
Then you use PO Generator to handle your buy items in the MRP system and handle your make items.
You could. Yeah, you sure could. Again, planned orders. So GP's got a tool, a utility that goes and looks at minimum inventory levels and does all that kind of stuff and generates POs, which are suggestions we give. And that's great, good tool. If it works for you, that's great. It doesn't hurt us any. You'll see the PO. And MRP can still run, it actually will still run for those items, and it will kick out planned orders, but again, you're not doing anything with them. They're just notifications. So if you've got a shortage and a planned order showing up in our system, you might want to take note of it. Now, you may go into PO Generator to create the PO manually, it's not going to do it, but I don't know the reason that it would affect us hard. Okay. So that's kind of, we were talking just a little bit about theory on dealing with exceptions. And I'm a big fan of, not everybody can work in this environment, I get it, but I'm a big fan of letting the scheduler decide what they need to make and let procurement figure out how to get that raw material to them. The challenge where this falls apart is if we're not scheduling far out enough for procurement to react. That's one. Or you've got, which is a close cousin to that, or you've got a scenario inside that planning horizon. That's where things start to get manual. You got to go deal with it and try to figure out what you got. Maybe you can't wait for the MRP to regen. And so you got to go figure out what's the impact going to be. And the batch ticket approach is what I would say. So my concern on that has more to do with, it's easy to say, what inventory do I have available right now? That's actually a rather easy thing to show. It's the impact that you just caused on what you thought was okay this morning when you looked at it by putting that plan order and rushing it into schedule, which you kind of have to do sometimes. What's that going to have a downline impact? Which gets us to a net change MRP, which means that when I do that, what effect is it going to have downline to everything else that I just affected? I get it. I think that's something we could do a better job of. Seth's been hitting me up for that for a while to take some time to do that. And we'll figure out how and what's the right way to do it. There are plenty of algorithms already written on how to do it, so it's not like having to reinvent the wheel. It's just a matter of processing time and are people really going to use it like that? Does that help? Okay, so back to this. So this really isn't constrained by anything. It's visually constrained. If you've got two things in the same fermenter or two things in the same grinder or the same mix tank, you'll see them. That's its purpose. And what we find, at least for most of our clients, is that's sufficient. That we don't have to get overly complex with this. And I've got really great friends that plan it together. They have a wonderful product. It's also about $100,000 a year. And that's an annual maintenance. To implement it is not inexpensive either, which is on top of that. Great tool. If you need it, it's a wonderful tool. It's doing things like changeovers and color patterns. You need to do it in this order, in this order, in this order, and you need to change over after this, etc. Wonderful tool. But in our typical client base, it's more than most of us, A, can afford, B, have the resources to put in, C, 3, whatever. It just doesn't get off the ground typically. So we're trying to provide something that you would use and get your feedback. This is not perfect. I've already told you about the scaling that we're going to be working with. And there are other things that we want your feedback so that we can make it better. An area that we're talking about is what do we do with this data. This is actually meaningful data. The P colon means it's a planned order. This is the product that's being made, and that's that crazy planned order number. Now, what do you want to do with that? I mean, we could make it available for you to change that, to put other data in there, et cetera. That's the type of feedback that we could use.
Yeah, maybe like just have the part name on it, and then when you put your cursor over it, the window pops up with that
Sure.
type of information.
Yeah, and we're doing some of that now. Yep, I could envision that. So,
batch yield size. I mean, you saw the production screen. It's kind of unique, but
yeah, right.
knowing what's coming out of that is always up to.
Good. Yeah, so I mean, you're getting a view right now into a real life dialogue. I mean, Seth and I over the last couple of weeks, every couple of days, talk a little bit about, well, what if we did this? What if we did that? I've seen this control that does this. Is that kind of what we're looking at? But it definitely will take more of a Gantt chart type of an approach where you've got resources over here to the left with jobs, and then you could actually, if you've got a multi-step job, like if I use the brewery for example, where I've got a brew, a fermentation, and packaging, I can see all those related together. So 4 brews go into 1 fermentation, going into 1 packaging. Those are all things that I think visually would make sense to see, so you see the whole packet. So in a scenario where you're going through a premix into, grinding for a couple of days, and then I mix, and then I package, being able to see that relationship of all those batches, that's what I'm talking about.
So I got lost. So this is possible or it's not possible? So this prerequisite process, the simultaneous use of production resources, is something that the calendar actually can look at, or is it something that you're talking about in a speculative form?
Great, I appreciate the clarification. So if I've got a process that's happening before this one, currently, right now, we do not have them joined together. But we're headed to that place where the end of one becomes the beginning of the other, and they're joined. So as I move them, they move together.
Do you think there will be the possibility of being able to create like changeover queues or no schedule queues in terms of just keeping your calendar, especially when you go to Gantt chart?
Right. We're going to have to do kind of downtimes for equipment and things like that. We're going to have to do that even if we don't take it into consideration on the calendar. At least we could see it. And you can see you've got a downtime here. It's got to come in behind that downtime. I can see that happening.
Almost maybe you can make it as part of the setup of the item. Is every time you do this, it has to have this before it or after it. Make it auto-generate it.
Good. Yeah. We've also talked about creating, I don't want to spend too much time on, development roundtable is great for this conversation for the rest of the group, but we've also talked about having transaction types or activity types that aren't batches. So cleanup, as an example, you could schedule a cleanup like you schedule a job, and just drop it in here. So now you can see it. I don't want to put anything on this date because I need to get some equipment. I need to get some maintenance done on that piece of equipment. Again, we're drawing that line. We're trying not to go too far into complexity. Otherwise, people wouldn't use that functionality, and then we got to support it. And that we're just trying to take it to the edge where it's usable, but not crazy. They might be the same. That help?
Yeah.
Okay. There is some navigation to this that I did want to talk a little bit about. We'll go back to the month view. So we're seeing, get off the fermenter. So we're seeing right now a bunch of planned orders. I'm looking around for batch tickets real quick. There's a couple right here, so we should move it down a little closer to see. So these are planned orders. I've already double-clicked on that. That brings up the planned order record. Know that I can actually navigate from the calendar directly into batch entry, so that if what we're finding is that people are using the calendar also as a navigational tool. Because currently the way to enter batch results is to go open batch entry, do an inquire on open batches, pick up that batch, and then record the results, which is certainly still functional. You can also navigate to it directly from the calendar. So whether you're using the scheduling function or not, you're still going to see the batches. Whether you run MRP or not, you're still going to see it on the calendar. So you can always just double click on the calendar, bring up that batch. It's a nice navigational tool that you can use. If you're not seeing it, it's most likely because of the batch types that are out there. We'll take a look at it for you. All right. So,
Just as a third aside, in development, I use this tool to create planned orders on the fly for testing.
thank you. So you can also create a planned order here. Just double click, and you can create a planned order. So you can say, I want to go make some product. So it doesn't have to go through MRP. It doesn't have to go through the planning workbench. You can create it here. Now, right now I'm creating a planned order. I'm not creating a batch ticket. It's getting on the schedule. In a moment, I'm going to show you how you convert that to a batch ticket. So I can say, in this case, in my demo database, I think I'll do some WORT, which is the output of brewing, a 50-barrel brew house, the dates, and it just put it on hand. I just created that planned order. Okay. So it was that simple to put something on the schedule. Okay. The next stage, so the next place now is to convert that and turn that into a batch ticket. I'm going to show you the screen that exists today, and then in June, in the next release coming out, you'll actually be able to convert this record into a batch ticket directly.